Your doctor looked at your blood sugar numbers, shook his head, and handed you another prescription. And you drove home thinking, I am already watching what I eat. I am already cutting back. How is this still getting worse? I hear that from patients every single week. But here is what nobody told you. There is one vegetable, one specific vegetable, that does something no blood sugar medication can fully replicate. It does not just push glucose out of your blood, it goes directly into your cells and repairs the mechanism that stopped working in the first place. The actual lock, the actual door, the part that has been broken for years. And most people eating it are eating it completely wrong, which is exactly why they never see results. I am going to show you what it is, why it works at a level your doctor probably never explained, and exactly how to use it. Because 3 of my patients used this correctly and dropped their fasting numbers by more than 40 points inside of 6 weeks. Not by starving themselves, not by cutting every carb they love, by adding this one vegetable the right way. Stay with me, because if your numbers have been climbing and nothing seems to be working, what I am about to share may be the most important 4 minutes of health information you have watched in years. My name is Dr. Albert. I have spent 30 years in clinical medicine, and a significant part of my career has been focused on metabolic health, specifically helping older adults manage blood sugar, reverse insulin resistance, and reduce their dependence on medications through evidence-based nutrition. I am not here to sell you anything. I am not replacing your doctor. What I am doing is giving you the information that a 12-minute office visit simply does not have time to cover. If that kind of depth is what you have been looking for, subscribe to this channel. I post every week, and everything I share is grounded in real science and real patient experience. Now, let us get into this. Here is what I want you to understand first. After the age of 60, your body's relationship with blood sugar changes in ways that most people are never told about. Your muscle mass decreases. And muscle is the primary place your body sends glucose when insulin signals it to. Less muscle means less storage capacity. Your pancreas has also been working for 6 decades, and its ability to produce insulin efficiently starts to slow down. On top of that, the low-grade inflammation that builds up in the body over years, from stress, from processed food, from poor sleep, physically interferes with the insulin signal at the cellular level. This is why so many people in their 60s and 70s develop blood sugar problems even when they feel like they are not eating that differently than they did at 50. The body has changed underneath them. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 1 in 3 American adults over 65 either have diabetes or are in the pre-diabetic range. And here is the part that should make you stop and think. Most of them do not feel it. High blood sugar in its early and middle stages is almost completely silent. No pain, no obvious warning. It simply moves through your bloodstream, quietly damaging the walls of your blood vessels, wearing down your kidneys, clouding the small vessels in your eyes, and slowing the circulation in your feet, all while you go about your day feeling mostly fine. That is what makes this so urgent. The damage begins long before the diagnosis. Let me explain what is happening inside your body in plain terms, because once you understand this, the solution makes perfect sense. Think of your cells like locked rooms. Insulin is the key. When you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises. Your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin moves to the surface of your cells and unlocks them. And glucose, the sugar in your blood, moves out of your bloodstream and into the cell where it is burned for energy. That is the system working correctly. Now, what happens after years of high sugar, chronic inflammation, and a diet heavy in processed food? The locks change. Insulin shows up with the key, but the door does not open the way it should. Your pancreas senses that glucose is still in the blood, so it pumps out even more insulin to compensate. Your insulin levels climb, your blood sugar climbs with it, and eventually the whole system becomes exhausted. That is insulin resistance. That is the engine of type 2 diabetes. Here is what most people, and honestly, many doctors overlook. One of the biggest drivers of insulin resistance is something called oxidative stress and cellular inflammation. When the cells in your body are under chronic inflammatory pressure, they physically pull back from the insulin signal. They stop answering, and no amount of medication fully fixes that if the underlying inflammation is still burning. This is exactly where the vegetable I am about to tell you comes in, and it is not what most people guess. The vegetable is bitter melon. And before you click away thinking this sounds like something from a health food fringe, I want you to hear me out, because the research behind this plant is more serious than almost anything in the supplement aisle, and I have clinical experience watching it work in real patients. Bitter melon, known scientifically as Momordica charantia, has been used medicinally in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean for centuries. But what matters is what modern research has found about why it works. Bitter melon contains at least 3 distinct compounds that act on blood sugar through completely different pathways. That is what makes it so powerful. It is not a one-trick plant. The first compound is called charantin. Charantin has been shown in research to stimulate glucose uptake in muscle cells, which means it helps your cells pull sugar out of the bloodstream even when insulin is not working at full efficiency. Think about what that means for someone with insulin resistance. The door that normally requires insulin to open, charantin helps push it open from a different angle. The second active compound is called polypeptide P, which researchers sometimes call plant insulin. This compound mimics the action of human insulin at the cellular level. It does not replace your own insulin, but it works alongside it, taking some of the load off a pancreas that has been straining for years. Studies published in peer-reviewed journals on diabetes and metabolic disease have found that polypeptide P can produce measurable reductions in fasting blood glucose in people with type 2 diabetes. The third pathway is arguably the most important for people in their 60s and 70s. Bitter melon activates an enzyme inside your cells called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. You do not need to remember that name. What you need to know is that AMPK is sometimes called the master metabolic switch. When it is active, it tells your cells to take up glucose, burn fat for energy, and become more sensitive to insulin. The medication metformin, which millions of Americans take for blood sugar, works in part by activating this exact same AMPK pathway. Bitter melon activates it through a natural, food-based mechanism. A clinical study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology followed patients with type 2 diabetes who consumed bitter melon preparation daily. Researchers found significant reductions in fasting blood glucose and improvements in glucose tolerance compared to controls. Other research from the Philippines, where bitter melon is part of the traditional diet, has shown consistent reductions in A1C with regular consumption over a 3-month period. Now, there is something I want to address directly because this is where most people go wrong with bitter melon. They buy a supplement, a capsule, a powder, something in a bottle, take it once or twice, feel nothing, and give up. And I understand why. But the research on whole bitter melon, the actual vegetable eaten as food, is more consistent and more clinically meaningful than the research on isolated extracts. The compounds work together. Separating them into a capsule is not the same as eating the whole plant. Here is what I tell my patients to do, and here is how Harold did it. Buy fresh bitter melon from an Asian grocery store, an Indian market, or increasingly from the international section of larger grocery chains. It looks like a bumpy, ridged cucumber, pale green, about the length of your forearm. Cut it in half lengthwise. Scoop out the seeds and the white pith with a spoon. That is where the most intense bitterness lives. Slice it thin. Salt it lightly and let it sit for 10 minutes. Then rinse. That process, which cooks in Asia have used for generations, draws out some of the bitterness and makes it far more pleasant to eat. You can then stir-fry it with a little olive oil and garlic. You can add it to an egg scramble. You can slice it raw into a salad if you have developed a taste for it. Some of my patients juice it, About 2 to 3 ounces of fresh bitter melon juice before a meal has shown real effects in clinical observations. The target for meaningful blood sugar impact is roughly 100 grams of cooked bitter melon daily, or 2 to 3 ounces of the fresh juice consumed before or with your largest carbohydrate meal of the day. That timing matters. You want those active compounds present in your system when the glucose from your meal arrives. If you want to subscribe to this channel, now is a good time. I cover exactly this kind of deep, practical health information every single week. The things that take 30 years of practice and a commitment to reading the research to put together. Hit that subscribe button and you will not miss what comes next. Now, bitter melon is the central vegetable I want you to focus on. But I will also tell you this. It works best when you understand what is happening around it. So let me give you the full picture. If you are eating bitter melon alongside a dinner that is 80% white rice and sweetened iced tea, you are fighting uphill. The vegetable is powerful, but it is not magic. What you are aiming for is a meal where the bitter melon's active compounds have a reasonable amount of work to do, not an impossible flood. Pair it with a protein. Pair it with fiber from other vegetables. Use it alongside some of the other blood sugar stabilizers I have covered in previous videos, things like chia seeds, avocado, and a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar before the meal. Each one of those strategies compounds on the others. That is how Harold's numbers moved so quickly. Not one thing, a deliberate stack of small changes that all work on the same problem from different angles. Let me come back to Harold for a moment, because his story has a detail in it that I think a lot of you will recognize. When Harold first came to me, he had already tried bitter melon once before. He had read about it online, bought a bottle of bitter melon capsules from a pharmacy shelf, taken them for 2 weeks, seen almost no change on his glucose meter, and written the whole thing off. I asked him a few questions. He was taking the capsules after his meals, not before. He was still eating a large bowl of white pasta most evenings. And the capsules he bought were a highly processed extract that had removed most of the charantin and polypeptide P in the manufacturing process. He had tried it, but he had not used it correctly. We switched to fresh bitter melon, prepared the right way. We moved it to before his meals. We replaced the pasta a few nights a week with lentils and roasted vegetables. And within 2 weeks, Harold called my office to tell me that his morning fasting number, which had been stuck above 180 for months, had dropped below 150 for 4 consecutive days in a row. He was almost in disbelief. He said, "Dr. Albert, I thought my pancreas was just broken." I told him what I want to tell you now. Your pancreas is not broken. It is exhausted. Give it the right support, reduce the inflammatory load, activate those cellular pathways naturally, and the body has a remarkable capacity to pull itself back toward balance. That is not a guarantee. It is not a cure, but it is real, and I have watched it happen more times than I can count. Harold, 2 years later, is still off insulin, still monitoring his numbers, still eating bitter melon 3 or 4 times a week, and still, his words, feeling better at 73 than I did at 65. So here is exactly what to do, starting this week. The first thing is to find fresh bitter melon. Look at an Asian or Indian grocery store in your area. If you cannot find it fresh, look for frozen bitter melon, which retains most of the active compounds. Fresh is always better, but frozen is far better than a capsule from a shelf. The second thing is to prepare it correctly. Cut it lengthwise, remove the seeds and white pith, slice thin, salt and rinse, then cook simply. Stir-fried with olive oil and garlic is the easiest and most palatable way to start. Do not overcook it to mush. A few minutes in the pan is enough. The third thing is to eat it before or with your largest meal of the day, the one most likely to raise your blood sugar. That timing aligns the active compounds with the glucose coming in from your food. The fourth thing is to track your numbers. If you have a glucose meter at home, take a fasting reading in the morning before you eat. Then note your reading 2 hours after your largest meal. Do that for a week before you start the bitter melon, and then do it again for a week after. That is how Harold knew it was working. That is how you will know too. The fifth thing, and I want to be clear about this, if you are already on medication for blood sugar, particularly insulin or a sulfonylurea like glipizide or gliburide, speak with your doctor before you add bitter melon consistently to your diet. These compounds can lower blood sugar meaningfully. When combined with medication that is also lowering blood sugar, the effect can stack faster than expected and push your numbers lower than is safe. That is not a reason to avoid this vegetable. It is a reason to do it with your doctor watching your numbers and adjusting your medication as your body improves. Bring this information to your next appointment. Ask your doctor to monitor your glucose more closely for the first few weeks. Let your body's improvement be the reason for the conversation. Your blood sugar is not just a number on a lab report. It is a signal. It is your body telling you whether its fundamental energy system is working or struggling. And when you are in your 60s and 70s, when you are thinking about the years ahead, about staying mobile, staying sharp, staying independent enough to play with your grandchildren or travel or simply wake up in the morning without dread, that number matters more than almost any other. Bitter melon will not fix everything, but it is one of the most underused, most research-supported, most practically powerful tools you have available to you right now, in a grocery store at a fraction of what you spend on a copay, and most people have never even heard of it used this way. I want to ask you something in the comments. Have you ever tried bitter melon before? Did you know about these three pathways, Charenton, polypeptide P, and AMPK? Or is this the first time someone has explained to you why this vegetable actually works? Leave your answer below. I read every comment, and what you share genuinely shapes what I cover next. And if you know someone, a spouse, a sibling, a friend from church, a neighbor you have been worried about, who is fighting their blood sugar numbers right now and feeling like nothing is working, please share this video with them. Not as medical advice, as a conversation starter. Because sometimes the most powerful thing one person can do for another is simply say, "I saw something that made me think of you." Subscribe if you have not already. Next week, I am going to cover something that surprises almost every patient I bring it up to. The specific way that poor sleep directly causes your morning fasting blood sugar to rise, even when you have eaten nothing overnight. It is one of the most overlooked pieces of the blood sugar puzzle, and once you understand it, you will never look at your bedtime routine the same way again. I will see you then. Take care of yourself.